Welcome to Softcover. I am Manasi Phadke. I work as deputy editor with ThePrint, and today's conversation is going to be one between two diehard Mumbaikars, diehard Mumbai residents, if I may say that, who love the city so much that they can't unsee its flaws, and we feel the need to talk about it in a more solution-oriented manner. I have with me Siddharth Bhatia, who has been the founding editor of The Wire and was also part of the founding team of DNA newspaper in Mumbai. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. He's written 3 books until now, and in this episode of Softcover, we will be discussing his latest and fourth book, Mumbai: A Million Islands. So thank you for joining us today. Uh, to begin with, if you could just in a nutshell tell our viewers what, according to you, the central idea of the book is before we dive deeper into the discussion.
So, just a tiny correction, it shouldn't matter, but this is my fifth book.
Oh, is it?
But
Okay, sorry.
no, doesn't matter at all. But just to say that I have lived in this city from birth,
Right.
and this book, in a sense, was within me for many, many years. I suppose I can say this safely that every citizen of this great city who walks around, who takes the bus, who gets into cab, who travels by its local trains, every person of this city could perhaps have written it or expressed it or have felt similar thoughts, sentiments as I did. Looking around and seeing what is going on and seeing the rapid changes that are taking place, the transformation really, it's a way that the city is shedding its old skin and adopting a new one. Uh, all of us have been somewhat, confused at what's going on. So, for
Hmm.
example, a plot lying next to somewhere close to your house suddenly becomes a skyscraper. A small bungalow in Bandra disappears. Large slum neighborhoods simply vanish. So I started thinking about this many years ago, around 7 or 8 years ago, seriously. And it struck me that all this is happening, but I'm sure there is some cost to it. There is some human cost to it. So if a slum, their entire slum vanishes, where do those people go?
Right.
If it's going to be a luxury set of luxury apartments, and now luxury is being redefined on a daily basis, you have flats selling for hundreds of crores. If
Hmm.
that's happening, it's happening on certain plots of land. Where do those residents go? That's one. And two, it also I started wondering whether there were policies coming, though this is not a policy oriented book. I must say this
Hmm.
emphatically. I'll talk to you a
Yes.
bit later about what the book is. This is not, all about government resolution, this, that, and
Of
the
course.
other. But there must be a set of policies which is facilitating all this. So I thought, let me start researching, and I was very clear about one thing when I set out to research this book, not write it, research
Hmm.
this book. I was clear about one thing, that it would contain the voices of the people of this city. I
Hmm.
was very clear that it would not be a top down book, it would be a bottom up book, or really a bottom book. That people, that does not mean it's only the voices of people living in slums. There are voices even of extremely rich people
Hmm.
who also are equally either confused or victims of this city's development. So that was the my entire motivation to write this book. And during COVID, the lockdown, I couldn't step out, but I started writing. and things started slowly coming together. So it's the past is definitely in the book, but the
Right.
present, a bit of future is also there.
Okay. So when you said that you started researching this book by talking to people, I mean, there are so many stories of change in Mumbai over the years. Where did you start from? What was that one story that you always found from the outside so compelling that you felt like you wanted to dive in and unpack that first as your base to then moving on to similar stories and packing them together?
So that's a very good question. I can't exactly pinpoint what the first thing that I researched or the first thing that struck me, etc. But I had been reading about how people had been shifted from their either slums or slums in on public land. By the way, most Mumbai residents know what a slum is. They pass it every day. Perhaps their service staff comes from those slums, perhaps. But how many of them have actually been inside one
Hmm.
or know what the life is? So when I started reading that people, and there are various kinds of slum: government land, railway land, private land,
Right.
port port trust land, all kinds of things. So when I started looking at this, thinking about this idea, I came across some references to people shifted from somewhere in town near what was then VT station,
Hmm.
GPO, the General Post Office, to far away Govandi or Mankhurd, or that, very, very far away, and taken there and given flats, and creation of what is called Lallubai compound.
Right.
And I thought to myself, if they were living here and their children went to school there and they went and worked in local houses as service staff, drivers, maids, whatever, how are they going to come from there every day?
Right.
And I happily came across uh, some people who had worked there as researchers, as NGOs. Incidentally, I must tell you, and I have mentioned this in my book in the introduction, in the acknowledgements, that this city's NGOs, I take my hats off to them because they work selflessly,
Yes.
and it is because of them that a lot of good things happen. At least the one thing they do is to ensure that people's lives are lived with some dignity.
Hmm.
And so I went there once with someone who took me around, and after that I've been there more than once, a couple of times, and talked to the people, and it became very clear that uh, this was definitely a story with a development with a human cost, and that led me to so many other related and unrelated areas.
So, what is the kind of impact that people face on their livelihoods when they are suddenly asked to move several kilometers away? Of course, I mean travel for jobs. It's not sustainable. You just mentioned that schooling, but how are people actually tackling these challenges on the ground when their lives are uprooted?
So, for one thing, many of these places where people get shifted after development of various kinds,
Hmm.
government oriented or public sector, private sector,
Hmm.
is that the many of these places have no public transport.
Hmm.
Many of these places, assuming they have public transport, it takes hours to reach your old place of work.
Right.
Assuming that person still wants to keep you on the job to say, hello, I want you from 8 o'clock onwards, and you
Hmm.
can't reach 8 o'clock. So they look for jobs close by. They, I mean, people survive, people survive the most tough odds. Uh, but they also have to survive where they're living because of the sanitary conditions, because of the way these places are constructed, because of new neighbors, because don't forget one thing, that whatever you might say, a slum develops a sense of community,
Absolutely.
and your neighbor is there to look after your daughter when she walks down the lane. Schoolgirl. This is an actual example. Somebody had told me that when my daughter walks down the lane to the reach a bus stop, there are 10 pairs of eyes which look after her on the way. And suddenly you don't know who your neighbor is, and suddenly you're living in a self-enclosed flat. Of course,
Hmm.
the flat is very good, brings, there's a toilet inside and everything. So people have to come up with all kinds of survival techniques.
Right.
I mean, uh, what happens if you are given a place on the seventh floor and the elevator breaks down? What happens?
Hmm.
And you've got a senior citizen living in your house. What happens? So these are, things. I mean, I must emphasize that this is not only about these kind of displaced
Yes.
people. There is also all kinds of other stories about some very unusual ways people live in this city.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't want to give away too much. You'll have to read it. And if
Yeah.
you are saying you've read some of the beginning, you will know there are very unusual ways people find to live in this city, without documents, with documents, with no ownership, with all kinds of. This is a very unusual city, because you can be in possession of a space in many different ways, legally, illegally, and in the gray border between them.
That's true. So, but while we are on the topic of slums, and you suddenly you have a sense of a community. You are probably running units, cottage industries from your household, and I mean there are dime a dozen such examples. And then you're moved several kilometers away to a building which has no infrastructure close by. Then you cannot necessarily run I don't know, a household unit from probably the eighth floor of a building. There are all kinds of permits, etc., that are required. Uh, what is exactly wrong? And I mean, the Slum Rehabilitation Act was also formulated in order to address all of these things, but somehow we've seen more questions arise than answers from all the SRA projects that we've seen taking shape so far. You've been a journalist, you've seen all of this very closely. So, this is straying away from your book a little bit. But what is essentially wrong with today's approach to slum rehab redevelopment?
So, Mansi, I must tell you one thing, that in this city, after the formation of Maharashtra state, and Bombay became part of Maharashtra, we had very, very progressive rulers. They were
Hmm.
really very progressive. And the whole idea, that was a progressive time in terms of policy. The whole idea was that housing in Bombay would be considered a public good. So, flats were built by the government, sold by the government. You could, a group of 10, 12 people from a particular, let's say, bank could
Hmm.
approach the government and say, give us a plot of land and we'll construct a cooperative society there. It was a public good geared towards the end user and the citizen.
Hmm.
Today, every policy, no matter what, I mean, there is chapter and verse on how SRA is the greatest policy in the world on paper, but every policy is subverted somehow in the interest of the builder and the private sector.
Right.
And now the situation is such that the word SRA immediately becomes shorthand for throw the people out, give them something, and uh, construct here. Why only SRA? Why not cluster development? Earlier it was, there have been occasions on one person, two people holding up a move from there. I mean, you've got an old person, senior citizen, he's going to say, I don't want to leave this building.
Hmm.
I think it's perfectly fine. But today it's 50%. If 50% decide, the other 50% have to fall in. So, people, where will they go? Now the redevelopment has become such a craze that perfectly fine buildings are
Are
getting
being torn
together.
down. Yeah, yeah,
You've been reading stories about Malabar Hill. The
absolutely.
Malabar Hills cannot handle this like these many skyscrapers.
And every lane in Mumbai right now has at least two or three buildings that are being torn down.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know this city. You're a reporter. You step out. Every city. This is unique. This does not happen in other cities. Delhi, for example, is a still a low-rise city, and they've had controlled increase in height. But what if suddenly every lane in Delhi's colonies becomes a skyscraper? It's impossible.
Mm. Yeah, the kind of pressure that you're putting on the city's infrastructure, which is not able to keep up with the building permissions that are being
It
given
is
out.
not. It is not. No. So again, I want to emphasize. Of course, you said it's outside the book's purview, but the book is not only about these things. The book is about the changes in this city.
Right,
I'm very clear. The book is about changes. Therefore, there's a lot of history. How
right.
Marine Drive came about is one part of it. For example, and how certain other areas emerged. The other Parsi colony, fine example of development, and see the way the residents have maintained a certain level, a standard, wonderful footpaths, clean roads. So citizens can do that. So all those examples are there. There's a lot of history. How did we get here? But there's a lot of current reporting. I have a feeling that much of it may perhaps get a little outdated, which is good because I want people to see it 10 years later and say, hello, this
The
happened,
city
and
is
because of that, this happened.
right. Right. So, which period, according to you, has been the most disruptive in Mumbai's history when the city has undergone such a huge churn that I mean, it's kind of changed inside out. What period would that be, according to you?
No, so from the time, let us say, from the time the East India Company took over, there have been many such periods. The big one was when in the 1700s, late 1700s onwards, when all the seven islands were knitted together.
Right.
So that was one big. Imagine lots of water being filled up, and you had Hornby Vallard, that's Worli,
Right. Worli
uh,
seaports.
you had every bit was brought together. So that was one, must have
Right.
been really disruptive, but the population must have been so small at that time that it could support that,
Hmm.
and it boosted transport, it boosted property, it boosted so many other things. Remember, the company at that time was eager to attract people to this city.
Hmm.
They were desperately attracting people to this. So that's one. Post plague, the Bombay Development, Bombay Improvement Trust, and BDD built again. There was reclamation. Again, they built housing, and that resulted in streets, Princess Street, for example, Colaba, as well as Marine Drive,
Hmm.
uh, uh, and that changed. That changed. I keep telling people that Marine Drive brought about the first major shift, because Bombay of that time had traditionally looked eastwards.
Right.
All the development was Parel, Baikala, Mazgaon, and of course Fort. And now suddenly the city started looking westward.
Yes.
That is Marine Drive, beyond that Malabar Hill, Pedder
Hmm.
Road, etc., etc. And that has not changed. Now again, builders have rediscovered the east.
The East. Yeah.
So that was the one major post plague.
Hmm.
Nariman Point, you could argue, was, but it was not disruptive. It was tucked away in one part of the city.
Hmm.
And now this, and this is the big disruptor of our times, which has made a huge difference, is continuing to make a huge difference, and is changing the profile of this city. You will see the profile of this city change now.
When you
Who
say
lives
this, you're talking about the current changes, the current
the
infrastructure.
current changes, the current madness for developing and redeveloping
Hmm.
is changing the very profile of this city. You know,
Right.
the who will be able to migrate here? A young talent will come to this city and say, where do I live?
Hmm.
That small bungalow where he could be a paying guest, or the even the big four-story building in Bandra where, you know, a young woman could live and work, is going to give away to skyscrapers, and they are not going to allow you to can
Hmm.
live there. So
Hmm.
who's going to live where? Dharavi is going to vanish, and I'm shocked that it is not being reported as much as it should. So also, if the slums go, where will the poor come and stay? They have
Hmm.
no place.
Yeah. I mean, there is also no sort of attempt to create a sufficient rental housing, stock or bank where,
Absolutely
uh,
not.
yeah. And so,
You're absolutely right. There is no attempt to create housing stock
and
for
with
that.
everything that is happening right now, where neighborhoods are being replaced by luxury towers, which I mean, the prices are so astronomical that even a basic, modest, hardworking Mumbaikar will not be able to afford living in the city. But and forget the fact that if a working class person comes in the city, that person will definitely not be able to afford anything. But are we repeating the cycle? I mean, to begin with, this is the reason why slums started developing in Mumbai, because formal housing was out of reach for many. And are we at the cusp where we are about to repeat the same cycle?
So slums have always been with us ever since the textile
Right.
mills came up.
Shut down.
Uh, no, no, came up
Him up.
when the
Okay.
yeah. So migrants came to work in textile
Right.
mills, and they were living in slums. There was no housing. Remember, most of the housing for migrant this was made by the mill owners under threat from the government to say
Yes.
you better do this, and so they built chawls, etc. And then the government built a lot of
Hmm.
housing for them, but the slums were there. So slums are, because of the city's reputation as a magnet, where you can come and make some form of living, even a fortune perhaps one day, but some form of living. So you came and you lived, and you got a place um, in a slum. There were all kinds of local dynamics to renting a place in a slum. There are people who came here and they rented and they became slum owners of
Hmm.
their small hovel or something. So now, in fact, what you're saying, I would contradict that to say
Hmm.
there won't be a cycle of slums because there won't be any land available for slums. It will all be taken over by developers.
Hmm.
So where will they live?
Hmm.
You know, I can promise you today that getting a room in a slum, existing slum, is virtually impossible,
Right.
because the local slum resident is going to say, if you come and move in, even if you move in on the first floor, who knows, you may demand a flat from the redeveloper. So I don't
Well,
want to do that.
correct.
So they will not.
Understood. So you've also said in your book, when you were talking about Mumbra, one of the things that you've said was that Mumbai's cosmopolitan pretenses have always been very thin. But and I don't disagree with you entirely that with several incidents to also support that. But this whole the character of this city has been the city has been defined by its multiculturalism, cosmopolitanism. How have these changes that the city has gone through affected or challenged the city's cosmopolitan character?
On a daily basis, I think we are very cosmopolitan people on a
Hmm.
daily basis.
Hmm.
Yes, there are instances of which I have mentioned, flats where only Gujaratis can stay, Muslims not allowed, even single women. I was told by someone who said even gays find it difficult because two men may want to move in a flat. So those apart, the city on a daily basis still continues to be cosmopolitan, perhaps because it is forced to be cosmopolitan. Who knows
Hmm.
who's sitting next to you in a train, for example? Who knows who's working in your office? The changes happen, the exceptions which I started noticing around the 92-93 riots, companies which had never hired people from one community or the other, never, big industrialists.
Hmm.
Second, buildings that will not allow. I went to see a flat once. This was part of the research, partly, but partly also because I was looking, and this person who was a sales manager showed me all the the presentation, etc. Was very proudly then said, and by the way, we don't accept Muslims because our other owners don't like it.
Hmm.
So I was about to say something, but someone who was with me put their hand on my hand and say, keep quiet for the moment, let's see how this goes. And he went on, and then he said, no, 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 it's not that we are prejudiced. We have built apartments for them also in Mumbai. Uh, so commercially, they will take advantage. So I said, why don't you know? He says, our other owners object to it. So then there are buildings that come up and clearly say that, there is a temple for a particular community. So the moment you say that, that's a the hidden statement there is clearly under unwritten statement there is clearly, apart from this, please don't bother. So
Hmm.
all that I found, but Mumbra happened because of the 92-93 riot,
Yeah.
because there was not enough housing in Muhammad Ali Road and in the areas around, and also because people came from different parts of it was still Bombay, if I recall, different parts of Bombay, and they had nowhere to go, so they rushed there because that's a safe space. I don't know whether you've ever been there, but if you
Yeah,
go
I've been
there,
there.
it's a safe space
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
everyone around you is culturally and otherwise the same. It may have its internal dynamics, but
Hmm.
it's culturally the same. And you go and find a place. So schools came up, restaurants came up, all kinds of services came up. And if you have read that bit, I met somebody who moved there, who had lived all his life as a child in an area where all the neighbors were Hindus, but
Hmm.
they looted his house, so his parents moved him, and now he's thriving there. So Mumra came up because of that. Now the
Right.
city, as I said, continues to be cosmopolitan,
Hmm.
far more than other cities, far more. But beneath that veneer, there is a prejudice also. And by the way,
Right.
that prejudice is within on a caste basis also. Please remember, it is not.
Absolutely. Yeah, not just community and religion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, there's also a lot of politics that's woven around these prejudices. I mean, parties have taken their agenda or created their agenda based on the insecurities that certain communities may have. Has all of this politics worsened the threats that Mumbai faces to its cosmopolitanism?
Politics always plays its own games because of its own reasons. I can tell you that if you go to any slum, no matter who lives in that slum, no matter, the local Shiv Sena person will help you get your Aadhaar card, will help you get a
True.
child into the school. This is how it works. This is the Shiv Sena, which has its Marathi Manus plank, but will help anybody
On the
who
ground,
lives
yeah.
there.
Hmm.
So parties play their games depending on their needs. So yes, they worsen it, and sometimes uh, they
To
uh,
help it.
they are helpful.
Yeah.
But I must tell you that that happens more with the Shiv Sena and, let's say, parts of the Congress and all that, because they are rooted in this city. Not all parties have found that roots in the citizens, ordinary citizens of this
Right.
place. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about the people who live in the skyscrapers. The
Right.
people who live in middle class areas, these two parties, and there are others also, are rooted there.
Hmm.
And there is a, recognition. You pass by, somebody is going to say hello to you. The Shiv Sena guy will come to your house. And I mentioned the Shiv Sena because you know what the party stands for.
Right.
So it comes to your house, they'll sit and have whatever. So it works because of those networks. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And that's why cosmopolitanism is critical for its survival. It's
Hmm.
absolutely critical for its
Hmm.
survival.
Hmm. So, at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that the changes have not just affected the poor, although we see that it has affected the poor and the marginalized to a large extent who have been moved to the fringes of the city, but they've also affected the rich, the well to do. Uh, can you give us a couple of examples that stood out the most for you when you were researching your book?
Yeah, so one particular, again, I like to keep some details to myself
Yeah.
so that that will spur the reader, yeah, the
Sure.
listener to pick up the book. But in one particular example, the construction of a skyscraper, which was a tower, which was extremely expensive property, and someone put down 70 or 80% of the flat price, thinking that it will come up in the next 1 year. And that has been held up for over 10 years. And he was saying that, look, I can manage it just about, but what about somebody who couldn't manage it, and they have invested crores waiting, and they're facing a loss on that invested money, as well as the fact that they perhaps have to take a loan from here and there and all that kind of thing. So there are cases like that where projects have been stuck, luxury flat projects have been stuck,
Yeah. This
and
Palais
people,
Royal, for example, or all these HDIL towers that you see. And as we
there
speak,
you are.
there are at least, I think, 3,000 home buyers who had put in all of their savings, hoping, okay, we'll move to a larger house, a better flat, overlooking a nice view. And yeah, I mean, I get what you mean. Yeah.
No, so those kind of things, and then when I'm glad you mentioned the phrase "nice view," because people have been promised a nice view, and after they move in, something else comes up in front of them. So that's
It's
cheating.
transparent.
So when it comes to development in this city or redevelopment, because of the way the system is geared, all bets are off. No guarantees. You buy something and you take your chances. When somebody tells you while you are buying an apartment that, sir, that's a public garden, nothing will come up there, you suddenly find that public garden being taken over. and something comes up there and it blocks a view of not just a grand view but also the sunlight,
Right.
then everyone faces that kind of situation. And this all is happening only because of A, policies, B, this whole nexus which is geared towards one side and not the other, and the citizen be damned. And the third is this mad rush for land and profits.
But world over, you see megapolises, whether it's London or New York, and which are also thriving hubs, and they're similar in character in terms of their cosmopolitanism, perhaps. And you see that these cities have, by and large, the look and feel has remained constant. And correct me if I am wrong, but that has been my observation. But while Mumbai keeps changing as if it's on steroids, what is the underlying issue here? What is it that we're doing differently or wrong?
So, in the if you go to places like Paris and London and all that, you will hear another debate,
Hmm.
because each city has its own history, and each city has its own laws. So you'll hear a different debate. For example, in New York, they won't break down an old brownstone building, but they will buy it and uh, break it down from within and completely make it
Hmm.
swanky, and instead of one family house, sell it to three people. Now the
Right.
people who are living there can't afford those rents anymore, so they get driven out. So that's the debate in London, in
Hmm.
New York City. In London and in Paris, rents have become so prohibitive that it is what they call hollowing out.
Hmm.
So middle class professionals have had to move a long way away, where they have to commute for their job, school teachers, nurses, etc. Because now it's only for the rich or the super rich, or people who happily happen to have invested, bought a flat when that area was very, very undesirable, and they happen to buy that flat. So this is a debate of various this. Mainly what is happening is so much money is around that money is now calling the shots. That's basically it. So
That's
it's
the truth.
because
Hmm.
of because in Delhi that can't happen because of certain laws. So it's happening in Gurgaon,
Hmm.
highly polluted place, Gurgaon, and flats go for 190, 200 crores. Imagine that. So this is also going to happening in Bombay with its own dynamic,
Hmm.
because of the city's land, the way the city is constructed. It's a island. Uh, it's now surrounded by water, so you can't grow sideways. That's why there's Atal Setu,
Right.
which will take you to Navi Mumbai. So basically, saying the moment it came up and the airport came up, prices there have become prohibitive.
Yeah.
So you say, but at one time when it was built, it was supposed to be an affordable option,
Right.
uh, and you went via Vashi, etc. Today, that place is going to also become unaffordable.
Right. So one
Again,
last question. Yeah.
again, there is no compulsion, no move from the government to say, "Hello, we
Hmm.
don't want speculation. We are going to build lots and lots of property here." Sitco
Right.
is going to. Sitco made a lot of property in the first few years,
Absolutely.
and people bought them from by lottery.
Hmm.
So it's not as if it's not possible, but free for all. And when you say it's free for all, it's not free for the consumer, but everyone else.
Yeah. No, and there have been these, very small scattered attempts by governments over the years at building housing stock. So there was this rental housing scheme of the MMRDA to basically create housing stock in satellite cities of Mumbai to ensure that there is no slum proliferation over there. But I remember attending meetings of the MCZMA at that time, where they basically remarked that what you are creating is in itself I mean, you're calling it formal housing, but the living conditions you're creating are so poor that they're not going to benefit anybody. And then that scheme kind of
Absolutely.
just, yeah. I
Absolutely.
don't think that scheme eventually went anywhere. So there have been small scattered attempts, but there needs to be a much more decisive push at everything that you've discussed today in this session. One last question before I let you go. So you've grown up in Mumbai. What was your childhood like? What was the Mumbai that you remember as a child, and how has that immediate area changed today?
So I've lived all over the city, and my till even the 70s, I remember. Maybe by the 70s, things had begun to change because the Rent Act. But everyone I knew lived on rent.
Hmm.
It was people, there was no yearning to A, no particular yearning, B, easy available of rental stock, C, there was no mortgage, there was no company that gave you a bank loan. So you had to have that much money in one shot. So, and housing came up, cooperative societies were formed, people got together and built houses. So that was the other thing. And if you, uh, much of the city was limited to about Bandra.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, many people, I mean, I grew up everywhere, as I said, from Churchgate to Bandra. So much of the city was there. Government housing was available. If you worked for the Reserve Bank or you worked for the railways or you worked for customs or something, you got government housing.
Hmm.
So if you, so of course I will have, you know, rose colored glasses, rose tinted glasses when I think of my childhood. But all I can tell you is that, you know, uh, I mean, I remember Marine Drive, and there was no Nariman Point, of course. And you walk down, and there was sea breeze from where the Oberoi is today.
Hmm.
There was nothing but the sea. So things started. I remember what one major change that came as a surprise to me was when I read in the 70s, late 70s, the construction of Lokhandwala.
Okay.
Lokhandwala was constructed on marshland,
Yeah.
actually. So when we started reading about that, and soon after that, once you realize that, yes, and one was old enough to then appreciate the changes that were taking place. But it was never this, as you said
Hmm.
rightly. I'm glad that you use the phrase because I like to also use it. Is cities development on steroids? It is pure. I mean, it if it will fail the steroid test actually if it is done on this city. It's completely mad what's going on.
And sorry, I did say one last question, but now definitely the last question. But you said that your book also gives a glimpse into the future, with
Future
regards
in
to the
the sense,
changes.
actually, there's not. I have not predicted any future. I have just said that this fantasy and this dream of our rulers, our ruling classes of Singapore, Dubai, Paris, etc., is likely going to be coming true because when there is no one, to mar the view, then of course it doesn't matter that that fantasy will not affect anybody in the city, and the marginalized, let's not forget, it's not only the marginalized. I mean, we should also consider the absolute middle class. As you
Absolutely.
said, can the absolute middle class, a working couple, one child, can they really afford to buy a decent property in this city? And I
Or
think
yeah.
the answer is no. The
And
answer is
increasingly, you see that they can't even afford to rent a decent property in a decent neighborhood of the city. So that
they
has
cannot
also.
do that, etc. So the what the uh, policymakers are saying, we love you, we want you to continue working here, and you can commute, but please go and live in Nalasopara. Nothing wrong with Nalasopara, but it's going to, affect your well-being, your commute, your time with your child, everything. And there's going to be no infrastructure of the kind that you will find here. So you go and live there, and you'll get a good salary. What's your problem? So even they are being driven out. So it's
Hmm.
not only about the marginalized,
Hmm.
it's about the ordinary citizen of
The city.
Mumbai.
Yeah.
The Mumbai ordinary citizen is going to be affected. And as far as the future is concerned, I think this is the trajectory. And we will soon be declaring that we have become the Singapore of India. That's my
All
only
right.
prediction.
We'll end on that note. Thank you so much for the honest discussion and the insights that you've given into the city and its fast paced development and how it affects people all over. And thank you to our viewers for joining us for this soft cover.